This episode is about minutes 61 through 65 of Solo, a Star Wars Story, featuring the exact person I wanted to talk to about these minutes, Dan Golding. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, you can call me Xanthi, and today is all about minutes 61 through 65 of Solo, a Star Wars Story, in which we meet the Millennium Falcon for the first time. These minutes start with Lando and L3 bickering about picking up these stragglers and end with Beckett and Chewie playing Dejarik on the Falcon. I'm really excited to have Dan Golding back to the show, composer, author, professor, radio host, Art of the Score co-host, Art of the Score podcast co-host, Dan Golding. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Xanthi. Firstly, I was really excited when you started this series on Solo because I think it's a really fascinating score and kind of underrated both musically and the movie. Super excited to return. And then, when you sent me the minutes that you'd selected, I was like, of course.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
These minutes were made for you. And well, not all listeners might know this, but I have now finished your book, Star Wars After Lucas, and listeners, definitely, link will be in the show notes. You should definitely read this. You really talk so much about nostalgia, and in a long form way, explore this idea of, especially in the Disney era of Star Wars, kind of like explore how the book explores like how we are dealing with nostalgia and even what nostalgia means, what it affords us. And it's just such a compelling, I feel like it's a compelling basis for which to talk about these minutes in particular, since we are both meeting the Millennium Falcon for the first time, which is like nostalgia in our veins. And we have the Star Wars main theme, which is like Star Wars in our veins, but I feel like could be a very polarizing choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to read my book. Nostalgia is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. It's like the key concept for Star Wars as a franchise, really. Even the first film, people immediately leapt to nostalgia as a way of thinking about, what George Lucas was doing. And there's so much going on with Solo, probably even more musically than in terms of the film. I think nostalgia is such an important part of what John Powell is doing in the score. And you're right, polarizing with what is I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this, but what is to some degree Luke's theme, and we've had this discussion, and I'm sure we'll continue to have this discussion. But look, when I was in the movie theater for the first time, I remember sort of going, oh, is that the right theme for this moment? I don't know, but I don't know, we'll get to it, but I've subsequently read some really interesting interviews with John Powell that have made me really appreciate it in a different light.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm interested what you have to say about that. Why don't we jump into listening to the minutes?
Yeah, let's go.
No.
Who are these guys?
We're taking them to Kessel.
Who are we? And what if I don't elect to go to Kessel?
Please don't start.
Oh, what? You'll have me white? You couldn't get from here to Blackspire without me. Now you're gonna make the Kessel run?
If she doesn't want to
fly, it's a shame you can't hear the music too often.
No. It's okay. She's definitely going.
Oh, why? Because you're my organic overlord?
Because I'm your captain. How about that? I actually would have a memory wiped. But she's got the best damn navigational database in the galaxy. Could use a fresh coat of paint, though.
Landonis, you do not want to press that button with me.
A lot of ships around here get boosted.
So what's happening here is Lando is taking Han, Chewie, Kira, and Beckett to his ship. And this is the beginning of the track called L3 and the Millennium Falcon. It's on both the regular version and the deluxe version. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And right at the start, I'm sure you mentioned this on the previous episode, we get the director trademark, the cameo of his brother.
Oh, actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that his brother, I forget his name. So Ron Howard obviously is the director, and gosh, what's his name? Same surname, not same first name, obviously. um,
Something
is
Howard.
is the guy that kind of has a go at them, and the L3 is sort of
Oh.
holding by the scruff of his neck.
Oh, that's the mean man that they
Yeah,
reference. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so that's like the director trademark, I guess, because like Ron Howard kind of affords his brother a cameo, sometimes a role in pretty much all of his films. But yeah, in a way, I don't know. I feel like the Lando and L3 sections of this movie are some of the, well, L3 in particular, I feel like is some of the most obvious kind of directorial changeover, artifacts. Like I feel like Phoebe Waller-Bridge's performance is such a performance of oh gosh, I'm sorry.
L3?
Yeah, L3, yeah, but is such a performance tied up with the style of the previous directors who
Oh, Lord and Miller.
Lord and Miller, thank you. We're recording across time zones. It's it's not actually very early here, but it's early enough that my brain hasn't quite kicked. With this very improvisational style kind of, which would have resulted in a very different movie. Anyway, I feel like Phoebe Waller-Bridge's approach is, I don't know, it just feels a little bit more like that movie. But then you have the Ron Howard, his brothers in here, so that scene was obviously reshot. That wouldn't have been done by Lord and Miller. So I mean, and I feel like the music kind of reflects that actually to some degree, like with a lot of the Lando scenes, like we get music that like it's still definitely John Powell, but it's kind of the Thomas Newman end of John Powell's musical repertoire.
Interesting. Do you mean like the part we just heard?
Yeah, a little bit that part.
Okay.
I'm probably thinking more like, like right at the film's conclusion, that scene.
Oh, like I almost called it source music, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not. There is some source music, I think, associated with that scene, but no, it's not source music.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds really Thomas Newman. It sounds like, I don't know, not quite American Beauty, but I don't know, like Finding Nemo or Wall-E or something, like a bit quirky. Quite an unusual sound for Star Wars, but so it's interesting, and like this sequence that we're hearing is not quite that, but it is still kind of unusual for Star Wars. Like there are guitars in there towards the end of the cue, just kind of playing a little rhythmic ostinato.
It gets Elfman-esque in a spot, I feel too.
Yeah. And that tuba solo, which is great. I really like that. For a while, I thought that was L3's theme, that tuba solo, but it's not.
What is it?
Yeah, I think it's just a throwaway melody. Maybe I'm wrong, but L3's theme is like the droid kind of theme that is almost featured.
It feels related to that for some
Yeah.
reason. Well, they're both minor.
See, I kind of have my biggest problem with the score, and when I say problem, I don't mean like intellectual problem, I mean like actual like difficulty as a listener, is that to me a lot of the themes sound quite similar. And
I'm
I
so glad you
really,
mentioned that.
yeah. And like I like them. I like all of them,
Me
but
too.
my ear has trouble distinguishing between them often.
Me too. I was like having trouble with the gang and Enfys Nest, Young Han,
Mhm, mhm.
and now that I think about this, like, or whatever it is, I think that's what we
Yeah.
just heard. And then if we think of like L3's main theme, it's so it's like everything. I feel like it's playing in the same. I don't know,
Yeah.
like in the same, like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's not like a lot of modal or even intervallic switching. Everything is kind of in a just a straight up minor key, I think, for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of this. And yeah, that's fine, but I think it probably, yeah, look, if I'm going to launch straight in by criticizing John Powell's wonderful score that I enjoy very much, I think, yeah, it's probably just shows that John Williams, just part of his kind of musical approach is to ensure that all the melodies in a score like Star Wars, which again he thought was a throwaway in 1977, that he was using, really very different tonal approaches and orchestrational approaches for all the melodies, which I don't think you could watch that film once just for the first time and be confused about a lot of the melodies, whereas solo, yeah, it's just a little trickier at
Yeah.
times to tell them apart.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree so much. And again, I really like the themes in this film. I really like the themes in the score. And the one that I was like tripping up by, and well, one could read it in a way that's like, wow, they like it's like a master plan. They like all interlocked, and that's the point. But
Yeah.
that's one way of looking at it. So if we think of like the Young Han theme, it's like, and then the gang is. And maybe that's like also a point, like that's he joins the gang, that's his phase in his life at the moment. But yeah, it just, well, Enfys Nest is different, but
Yeah,
but the gang and Han, yeah, which Williams did Han, but first.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and you're right. I think there is a fair argument that they are designed to interlock, and certainly, like in a lot of the action sequences, particularly as the film goes on, Powell uses them beautifully. They just kind of flow wonderfully together. You can go from like, even just you playing those two. Then I'm like, I can think of half a dozen examples where it feels like Han's theme just effortlessly flows into the gang or vice versa. And, we see in the mine sequence, with L3's theme being really fleshed out and the gang thing being thrown in there and Han and,
I mean, it's like everything was made to be one grand fugue.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. A few, and yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, if you've read my book, I'll talk a lot about the fugue.
Yeah, which will be relevant for me in a few weeks.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. But how do we get here? Yeah, L3 in that kind of almost like introductory scene of hers, I guess, where they're walking back to the Falcon. And I was rewatching these minutes, and I realized that actually she's really not in the film very long. As a character, yeah. I've seen this film, I don't know, not as much as most Star Wars films, but probably still 5 or 6 times. And yeah, she's really in and out very quickly. Yeah.
Like Val.
Yeah, exactly.
way that the music enters there when she comes in is like, what does it get? It kind of has this, I don't know. I think it's an interesting horn line. I think it's easier to hear if I play it from the actual soundtrack. And then, was it before? Oh, here. Which is like so hinting at something. Like it sounds familiar, Star Wars. It feels like the evil associative progression according to, Frank Lehman's catalog.
Yeah, and those I mean, even just the use of the woodwinds there, yeah, very, very Star Wars.
Yeah, I think it sounds. I mean, that particular, the voicing of it is really interesting to me because, like the flute sounds like it's the bottom voice, and
Oh yeah,
it's not voiced in a way that's like three of the same instruments. I mean, although the woodwinds, of course, are a section, but yeah, like the flute really, the texture is more. I guess jagged is the wrong word because it's smooth, but it's like each line seems more distinct than I'm used to just these chord things sounding. But I could be wrong. But by bottom voice, I guess I mean if we're considering the base of the chord, not really bottom, but I'm thinking more pitch class.
yeah,
Wise.
yeah. No, for sure. No, I think you could be right there. Yeah, and look, it also reminds me that one of the elements of the orchestra that's really gone missing over the last 2 decades, probably thanks to Hans Zimmer, is the woodwind section. And yeah, woodwinds are so key to that kind of older orchestral sound that Star Wars is really aligned with. So, it's perfect, really,
Totally.
that Powell should make use of woodwinds. Yeah,
Definitely. I in general, I like the way that I like the way that the woodwinds and the strings are in this score.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're like traversing this bridge and stuff, and we're about to see the Millennium Falcon. So we're going to hear a little bit of a build-up that happens to this moment. I think it sounds like Christmas morning.
Look away. I can't perform with you looking at me.
Please indulge her.
That's the electric guitar you're talking about? Or no? Maybe not.
I feel you looking at me.
I don't know that it's electric. I think it might be.
What are we doing here? This guy's a hustler.
This reminds
I
me.
don't even think he's got a ship. If he does, it's gonna be a piece of junk.
There she is, my pride and joy. The Millennium Falcon.
And here we go. So it is recognizable as the main theme, but it doesn't sound like it does anywhere else except maybe trailers.
Looks like you had a little work done.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, okay, let's come back to the melody in just a moment, because you were saying something very interesting about it sounding like Christmas morning, and I totally agree. I think that's so, it's kind of weird actually, like that lead in where like it really feels like something from not just Harry Potter, but I want to say like the 5th or 6th Harry Potter movie, like not the John one, like
Yeah.
where the music is a little bit less accomplished.
Yeah.
It just feels a little bit like kind of treading water, that music. like we're waiting for the thing to arrive. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. It seems like a slightly strange choice to me.
Right. I mean, it's for the audience. We
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or, what is it? It's like, yeah, it's like just outlining, like, yeah, it's just outlining, well, I pulled an example in preparation for this. So let me
Great.
play the beginning of What's This from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of have a similar twinkly instrument thing happening that are like outlining chords, just arpeggiations, twinkly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, in solo, in that it's a harp, and in solo it's a
sounds like a celeste.
Yeah, celeste, celesta. I've heard like 6 different variations of how to say that instrument. But it kind of almost has like a music box effect, right? It's like what's in the present. The present is Luke's theme. Yeah, but it's interesting, and like that whole sequence as well is so strange. I think it's one of the weirdest jokes in the movie. The "Don't look at me, I can't perform while I'm."
Yeah.
Like I only just realized while preparing for this episode that what's going on is the joke is that Lando's had his ship totally impounded and we're breaking it out. And I realized that, of course, with the landing lock or whatever it is later. But in this sequence, I didn't get it despite my 6 watches through. And I think that's just because every single time I've been so distracted by this really weird joke.
Right. Right.
And again, I have to say that feels like this weird combination of director approach. It doesn't feel like a Ron Howard joke. I mean, the director's not responsible for the script, but it just feels weird.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about L3, but I agree that it feels weird. But even more so than that, I think I just I failed to pick up on a lot of the plot details, a lot of the details of circumstance throughout this film, like the specifics of the impounding or just any of the specifics. Also, one thing for me that I keep bringing up is that it's just so dark. It's so dark. It reduces my ability to really discern what is happening.
Oh, you mean visually?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely been the trend over the last decade or so. Yeah. Although in a way, like the 1970s also had some really, really dark, visually dark films. Like the sort of conspiracy thrillers of the 70s. I mean, I always think of a film like Clute, Klute, which is just so dark and dark in a way that's different from today's like digital photography. Because they were shooting on film in the 70s. And you do kind of get aspects of that in Star Wars. With I don't know, maybe Han Solo's introductory scene in the cantina is pretty dark, but it's nowhere near as dark as anything we get in Solo. Yeah, you're right, or even Rogue One to some degree.
Yeah, I think the color grading is also plays a role in it too, and in this scene in particular, I feel like it looks so much like a set. Like with all the fog going and all the, I get that it could look like a junkyard with, I don't know, it looks so dusty. It looks so, it looks like there's just multiple fans on doing the smoke or doing the steam or whatever it's called, the fog.
Yeah. It's it is an interesting looking film. But anyway, should we talk about what
Yeah.
it leads up to then, because it's really this is the big event.
This is the big event. Yeah. Um, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna play exactly what is happening here.
If he does, it's gonna be a piece of junk if it's in here.
There she is, my pride and joy. The Millennium Falcon.
Looks like you had a little work done.
Indeed I have, and installed an escape pod, an amendable notch, alluvial dampers, a wet bar.
And a fortified infraction restraint on the landing gear. Looks to me like they impounded your ship, Lando.
This is unbelievable. I'm definitely gonna have some words with someone about this. You must have experience with these, right?
Yeah, I could take it off.
Okay, so the main part's
Fantastic.
done now. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So in the theater, yeah, as I said, I heard this and I was like, oh, I don't know if that's right. It doesn't feel right. It's Luke's theme. Or, I guess the main Star Wars theme to some degree, well, to a large degree as well. But I really think, and we talked about this last time in the Swashbucklers episode of A New Hope, that I feel like actually in the underscore, John Williams does use it more or less consistently as Luke's theme, or at least broadly associated with Luke. Aside from the opening title of every film, like it barely appears in.
And he himself has called it Luke's theme, I believe.
Yeah. Which is funny actually, and look, maybe we'll come back to this in an episode in a year's time. But how John Williams has talked recently about he's going to write a theme for Obi-Wan because he never wrote a theme for Obi-Wan, and it's like the Force theme is you wrote in the liner notes to the vinyl album of 1977 that the Force theme is Obi-Wan's theme, and yeah, so this kind of retrospective, this theme is actually this person's theme. Is a little bit weird to me, but look, John Williams can do what he likes. So, but yeah, it felt weird hearing it, and I think it, as I said, so subsequently I've read some interesting interviews with John Powell, and he said that particularly with the Kessel Run sequence, which I think the track
Reminiscence therapy.
Exactly. Yep. And he described, I don't know if you've seen this interviews, Anthony. It's I think it was Film School Monthly, and he talked about reminiscence therapy as an actual thing, where he said that people who have like dementia or illnesses which cause them to forget who they are, that people will bring them objects of their life to kind of remind them of who they were. And so he said that with reminiscence therapy, which is a cue that uses the asteroid field among other things from the original trilogy, he said that the point of that cue's title and that whole approach musically is that he's kind of almost like reminding Han who he's going to become musically before he becomes that person, which I thought was kind of interesting. But he also talks about that with the Millennium Falcon sequence, this cue that we're hearing, that it's like the use of Luke's theme is kind of fate in a way. It's saying this is the callback to the future. This is what's going to happen to you, in whatever we are timeline wise, 10 years time. And you're gonna meet this person. You're gonna have a more heroic calling in life, and that calling has kind of, this is the big moment where it starts to reveal itself. That it's the combination of you and the Falcon and, you know, one of these characters in Chewbacca are gonna, you know, you're eventually gonna get to this place. Not yet, but you're eventually going to. And so I think that kind of works, actually.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, I have come up with all of my own ways to justify it all as well, just because I want to make sense of it in a way that works for me. And what I will say that although I haven't loved all the times the main theme has cropped up, particularly when it came up during the Corellia chase, just in that speeder. I can accept that it is indicative of something like bigger. Like if I take like a few steps back and think like not necessarily just as Luke's theme, but take it, because a lot of these themes have like its direct association and then it has like a little bit of a ripple association. I think all of them do. Like, you know, the Emperor even, they'll have like a little bit of an immediate ripple. And I think Han being tied to Luke's future is basically what ties it together for me too, and makes it work. I think also it comports, or it works also with Enfys Nest, like the interactions that they have at the end of the film with the coaxium and her kind of trying to convince him to join the rebellion, and he's like, no. But we do hear like rebel themes. We hear like a little bit of Resistance March at one point. We do start to hear rebel things associated with him, even though he mentally is not on board with that yet. We do, as viewers, know that in his future, he will take to it begrudgingly, but he will be part of this rebellion, whether he likes to right now or not.
And definitely it needed some kind of emotional underscore. You know, it's one of the big reveals of the movie, like Han meeting the Falcon. Yeah, and so, you know, we've got to talk about as well, like the fact that it's not just the appearance of the theme, it's the way it sounds.
Exactly. Yes.
You mentioned before, Santi, that it doesn't really sound like this, and I thought it was interesting that you went to Except for Trailer, because that was also something that I thought of. I figured out the harmony. You might have done the same by the sounds of it.
Tell us.
So it's like,
Right.
and goes into the little, you know,
The rebel.
Yep. But yeah, so it's like, it's like this descending harmony, which is pretty unusual. I mean, the harmony for Luke's theme, honestly, is usually, or the main theme is usually pretty static. Like, it's very declaratory.
Yeah. And it's also the theme goes by faster. It's not drawn out like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Yeah. And you know, it made me think, firstly of another statement of the main theme, which is in the trailer to Rise of Skywalker.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking of.
Which is similar, starting on the 6. I mean, look, this starts on the 1, which is the, you know, it's in E, right? So the one we've just heard starts on the 1, but then very quickly goes to the 6.
Yeah.
So, but in the Rise of Skywalker trailer, it's like, which is very, I mean, it's very effective. I think I know, so I'm pretty sure the person who's responsible for that trailer music is a fellow Australian of mine. I think
Of
his name, of mine. Yes,
mine.
We know each other well. All 24 million of us. Yes. I think his name is Blakis, or that's the kind of name he goes by on the internet. and it's very effective because it's kind of startling, you know, like up until that trailer, you'd never really, and this moment in solo, never really heard the Luke's theme. I was going to say the Force theme, Luke's theme harmonized like this, and it's very poppy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it sounds like pop music, like, and I was.
It is a variation of the 4 chords of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of whether there was like a pop song that uses these in that order, and
Mm-hmm.
so
There are
Toto's
tons.
Africa.
Yeah.
So very Hans. But I was also thinking that to return
Alejandro, Lady Gaga.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But I was also thinking that to return to John Powell's version, whoops. You know, like these simple chord progressions, that's actually something that he does.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense in a way, because like to me, what this also reminds me of is which is the main theme of How to Train Your Dragon, which is wonderful.
Mm.
You know, one of, well, actually, look, probably Powell's most celebrated work, which again, you know, is even more straightforwardly poppy though. But you know, to go, it's like that's a million pop tunes, and that's why it works. Is because it's so, you know, people use that chord progression for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great chord progression.
Mm-hmm.
And Powell, I think, has made that a feature of some of his work, not all of it. You know, like you know, his big breakthrough score, I think, is probably still the Bourne Identity, and that's, you know, there's not a lot of chord progression in that. It's just like static C. But yeah, I think these beautiful long melodies that are such a feature of like How to Train Your Dragon, and probably John Powell's animation work in general, like, yeah, he's just kind of borrowed, you know, the great Star Wars melody from Williams and done a little Powellism, which is to underscore it with a bit more familiar, broad, you know, chords that give it the effect of lyricism, I think, especially when the melody is like that. Yeah, like you want to sing along, and there is a choir.
So there's a lot. There's so much happening. I feel like probably not on this. I didn't have this podcast at the time, probably, thank God. But when the Rise of Skywalker trailer came out, and I did watch it before the film, which I no longer am a trailer watcher, just for the record. But
I heard you say that in another episode. I was really intrigued.
I'm not a trailer watcher. Also, I just watched the solo trailer for the first time before we talked, because I was thinking of trailer music because of this theme, and I was like, I wonder what the solo trailer was like, and it was absolutely not what I was expecting at all. It was it was not like a Star Wars trailer. The musically,
No,
it was like I don't even know how to describe it. It was like just generic trailer with a lot of hits. That's what it was. So it probably can't. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why.
And it kind of starts with this like dun kind of guitar,
like
right?
Yeah, it's like I was confused. I thought I had to check to see if it was like a fan edit or whatever, but it was from Star Wars YouTube channel.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with Solo in particular, they started to realize closer to the release date that maybe they'd oversaturated things a little bit. I mean, that was certainly what they realized afterwards. And by they, I mean, you know, Lucasfilm / Disney. I wonder if they maybe lent away from that a little bit in the marketing of Solo. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think, you know, one of the essential functions of the Star Wars story movies, of which there are still only 2, like this and Rogue One, is to try and like quote unquote tell new stories or try new genres. And
Mm-hmm.
like Rogue One, for better or worse, there's a whole nother conversation. But Rogue One, I guess, does do that.
Mm-hmm.
The
Kind
story
of.
it tells is kind of different. I feel, yeah, some people have said it's a war film, which is weird to me because war is in the title of all of them. But you know, it is it is a different type, a different genre of war movie. And does have a very different mood. It's a much darker, much grimmer, much less fun mood. And I think that actually Solo retains very effectively. It's my favorite thing about it. It retains this sense of roller coaster energy
Mm.
that I think is actually really key to Star Wars. I think it's you know, like it's one of my favorite things about the franchise, and particularly, you know, one of the things that made the first film so successful is that it never slows. I mean, you know, to our eyes today, it feels quite slow, I guess, but in 1977, it was lightning paced, and kind of had that effect of feeling like, yeah, like a roller coaster to some degree, just kind of lurching from one crisis, which our heroes improvise through, to another, like Raiders of the Lost Ark as well. And I feel like Solo does that so well, and that's, you know, if I was going to define what I'm looking for in a Star Wars film, it's that energy actually. So I feel like that, yeah, that's easily one of my favorite things about Solo. How did we even get onto that? Sorry, that's quite a
trailers and stuff. Well, here the thing is like, well, okay, well, to bring it back to like what to the Star Wars theme, to Luke's theme / the Star Wars theme / Millennium Falcon reveal music. What makes it so different, despite being recognizably the theme, and what makes it also sound trailery, or even outside of the trailer thing. Like, not only is the harmony underneath it, it's sort of replaced with like a more pop harmony. The rhythm, or it's augmented, right? It's like the melody is augmented, like time-wise, so like it's stretched out. Which actually I feel like in this score there's a lot of play with like augmentation, diminution. Like the time-wise, I feel like the themes, like I feel like John Powell really plays with the length of time, like the timelines of, you know, that these themes are occupying. And then also I think one big thing is like the rhythmic shift of having it turn into this like stately, the hits land on one rather than on the upbeat, you know, like in the main theme, it's 1, 2, do 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 do, you know, it's like 1, 2, do 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 do, and here it's changed so that it lands on the like do 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 on a downbeat, or on a beat one. You know what I mean? And it makes it sound more stately. It's definitely less kinetic. It's more familiar. Like everything is turned into a more pop is not the right word, but like
anthemic, isn't it?
Anthemic. That's exactly the word. It's totally an anthemic version of this. We even have the strings, which are doing this. Let's see, let me play it. So strings doing the tremolo thing. And then they kind of stay on the same note, so it's like pedal tony. You get these suspensions, like right here. Until this part.
Yeah.
It's all set up.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the lovely, silky, smooth version of the rebellion. Yeah, but no, absolutely. it's kind of, it's full bore, isn't it? Right?
Yeah,
It's like,
and not to mention the choir, like you said. Yeah.
yeah. And that choir as well, like I'm sure it's a real choir because they had
Hmm.
the money for it. But it sounds a little bit out of the box
Yeah,
computer,
it does.
which is what you hear in a trailer because it's cheap.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna pay
Listeners,
that.
we're referring to like samples, like when you can use your digital audio workstation to put in a sound of, a pre-recorded sounds of people just going like, ah,
I've probably
and
got one somewhere. It'll take me a minute
and
to
the
bring.
fact that they're not even saying words here kind of makes it sound like that too, because oftentimes those sort of out of the box choirs will just be, sustaining a syllable like an ah or ooh, something like
Mhm.
that. So that's
Yeah,
why it sounds
you,
like
you
that.
you can even set it. So you choose between which vowel you want. I mean, actually, hold on. Here we go. Like, right? That's A, right? Or like,
Yeah.
what do you got? Like E,
Oh my.
E, O, O, or mm. Um, so yeah, it just kind of sounds. It kind of sounds like. Yeah, I mean, that is literally out of the box. That's not a. That's like a built-in choir that came free with something else that I bought. Like, yeah, yeah. Like, and like as I said, I'm sure it's a real choir.
Yeah,
It
I
just,
think in this case it is.
yeah, and I actually feel like a lot of this score kind of sounds, like there's this ongoing kind of debate in film music about where the scores are kind of mixed to sound like virtual instruments. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of this score probably is quote unquote real, right? But
Mhm.
like is mixed to sound like, with like a lot of compression and noise gates and stuff like that. Like essentially, um, you know, um, audio tools that make it sound like, like a digital instrument, even though it's not.
Yep.
Particularly with
Which
percussion,
is surprising. Which is a surprising, which to some people that may seem like a surprising choice, because if you're using a real instruments, why not, basically show the world that they're real instruments by mixing it like they sound like real instruments. But no, Dan is absolutely right.
Mm.
There is a trend of mixing even real instruments, like to sound more. It leads some composers to be like, "What is the point even if you're going to mix it like this?"
Yeah. Well, I think exactly. I think with percussion at least, which is one of the elements of this score that I think sounds most digital, even though it's probably not.
I think some parts are digital though.
Yeah, yeah. Some parts probably are. Yeah, but I think it's about like you can't get that impact otherwise. Like it's also mixing for the multiplex where you feel the percussion in your chest, and not just a single hit and the reverb last. It's not like boom and we leave it there. You can get that effect obviously as well, but you can get that effect with like timpani or a big bass drum in a regular recording sound stage, and that's great. But like if you're having a complex rhythm like a dun 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 dun, dun like something like that, you probably, at least in contemporary times, want like all these noise gates and compressors on there, so each of those hits are as strong as possible. And that's often because they're written using digital tools. And John Powell is very upfront about the fact that he writes on a digital audio workstation. He's one of the most amazing composers to follow on social media because he posts these fantastic videos, which I might have talked about already, Xanthi, where he kind of posts the demo using his original digital tools, and the like the MIDI scroll.
Whoa, wait. I know what you're talking about. We haven't talked about it on this show because but but I do know, and I have seen a couple videos where he shows basically like a view of the score, and it's scrolling like it's one of
Mm,
those score videos where like you can hear
mm.
it playing while the score is in front of you. Are you telling me that's a mock-up?
So usually what he does is he blends the two. So
Oh, it sounds so. I thought it was just the recording of the. Interesting.
yeah, so and he'll sometimes, I think he'll usually like annotate it, like definitely the Karelia chase and part of the Kessel Run. He's posted both of those cues or parts of them. I think maybe like 3 minutes of each, and he goes through between the mock-up and then the final score recording, and he'll annotate it. He'll say, like mock-up and then final score, and blend between the two. In fact, they're perfect for teaching, because I get my students to close their eyes and hold up their hand when they think it's the real orchestra, and then take their hand down when it's the digital demo, just to see whether their ears can pick up the difference. Yeah, anyway, but yes, I mean, this is how John Powell, I mean, they're super interesting videos, but that's how John Powell composes, is at a digital audio workstation, which is, how most composers work these days. But I've heard people say that, one of the defining things about his approach is that he basically composes all on piano first, and then puts in the, orchestra sounds later, while still using digital audio workstation. I should just say DAW. But so he's basically writing on an extended like piano, like many pianos going at once, which I can kind of believe, because the other thing that I think about solo and a lot of his scores actually is they're so full. Like every frequency is doing something almost all the time. Especially during an action sequence, there's just so much going on in a way that's different to John Williams. I mean, just to go back to A New Hope, I mean, the final Death Star trench run sequence, I was reading the liner notes that I mentioned before, and John Williams describes it as, awfully difficult and complex music for the orchestra, and I'm sure it is, but to listen to it, there are several moments where it's just brass, or just strings, like the orchestra is really divided up into sections, and not everybody is doing everything all at once, whereas for some of Powell's action sequences, it's really full is the only way I can describe it.
Yes. I get that sense as well, like when you're playing on a piano. Although I feel like I think a lot of modern composers do that, where they're composing on, a DAW with a piano. I think there are parts where I can tell where Powell seems really comfortable in, particularly in violin parts, where it seems like it's not just along the piano keyboard. But I think a lot of the main themes sound kind of similar, because that kind of is what happens when you put you set your hands on the piano, you're oriented around middle C, and that's your thumb and index finger make a perfect fourth. And it just lines up so nicely unless you really challenge yourself to play in different keys, which I know as a composer and person who grew up playing piano myself, it's hard to make myself be like, all right, shake out of my box. Like, I'm going to put my hand in a new place and just try to like improvise there. It's so much easier to go back to the place where my hand knows really much, much, much better.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. I face the exact same problem, and I'm sure every composer does, unless you're, like a Juilliard trained pianist like John Williams. So,
right. Which is why like having the opportunity to compose on other instruments, or like for me, like I definitely compose less in a more fluid way when I'm doing it on violin. The tools can really impact that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have the piano, the choir, we have the whole it's everything for the Millennium Falcon. It's the anthem. This is it. And then we go right into the Rebel fanfare. And right as Beckett is talking about right as Lando is saying that he installed an escape pod in the mandible notch. So maybe he's talking about his upgrades, but maybe it works because the rebels escape pod. That's how we start A New Hope, basically.
Mm.
So that escape pod will come in handy. Lando doesn't realize it. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong escape pod. What am I talking about?
Yeah, but
I don't know what am I talking about.
we do see the Falcon escape pod in the movie that was released previous chronologically, right? Because Rey uses it in The Last Jedi. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for her mummy trip. Yeah. Oh my gosh. There we go. Thank you. And as we continue, let's continue this this conversation. After Beckett jumps in, let's see. Here we are.
I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But I accept it.
You're getting the hang of this, Lando.
So we're hearing the gang theme.
Yeah.
Come on, Chewie. Gonna need a little bit of that Wookiee oomph.
But it also sounds kind of in the same just space.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I feel like I've sounded like I've criticized Powell quite a lot, but actually one of the effects of, and I do want to reiterate that I love the score. I think it's such a such an achievement in many ways. But I think one of the strengths, actually, the flip side of everything that we've talked about the melodies sounding kind of similar, and him having this kind of really singular tonal palette for a lot of his music, because everything is doing everything all at once, is that it is very easy actually for him to kind of as you said before, Xanthi, like fugue everything together quite effectively. Like everything just flows and it doesn't feel out of place, that we've gone from the main theme to the Rebel fanfare to the gang in the space of like 25 seconds or something. It just feels effortless.
That's a really good point. Like, it doesn't feel like reaching too hard when all these themes come in, because they just all fit together so nicely. Let's listen to that again.
Yeah, I can take it off.
Fantastic.
Along with 5% off your cut. You're down to 20.
There we go.
I don't like it.
Nice woodwind moment.
But I accept it.
I think that's a nice handoff.
Yeah.
Come on, Chewie.
From the woodwinds to strings.
That Wookiee oomph.
And this part,
Your plan is underway, Enfys. We've attached
Enfys
the
Nest.
beacon. They won't elude us now.
I think this is a very interesting part.
If they survive, they'll bring the prize to us.
Okay, we have to talk about that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to your episode with Frank Lehman about the introduction of the Enfys Nest theme in the biggest place where it gets. And look, actually, that's just to return briefly to the choir. That's probably another reason why the choir sounds quite so out of the box, so digital in that Millennium Falcon reveal scene, because the choir is used so unusually in the rest of the film with the Enfys Nest.
Right.
Material.
I think it's a different choir entirely.
Yeah, that would not surprise me at all. Yeah. But yeah, great theme. And also I think, and this is another thing that I think Powell does pretty effortlessly is, we've just modulated into a slightly different key, I think, which just reinforces that this is new, this is different musical material. This doesn't fit quite so clearly with what we've heard.
Yeah, I think the transition of it all, I'm going to actually play it on the clean track, from the soundtrack. Sounds like it's ending. And we have that sustained. That's such a good little that's such a good little I don't know. It's just an interstitial like moment when they're cut away to see that the Marauders are actually like keeping track of them.
Yeah. I
So,
was trying to figure out.
so it's F sharp.
Yeah, felt like a half step. Yeah. Okay, I won't do that. Yeah.
What I think is interesting is like not only the rhythm of the like the hits, which get progressively louder. It's like these 3 hits, and then another 3 hits but louder, and then 3 hits but louder.
Yeah, and that, that kind of like it sounds like, I mean, there's a bunch of percussion, but the biggest thing to me is like the cymbals being smushed together. Which, gosh, you had some percussionists on a few episodes ago for the New Hope one, right? The finale, and I'm sure they explained it much better than I could. But yeah,
James
like,
Waterman, if you're listening.
yeah, that like, it feels like that you can get the same effect with a virtual instrument. You can get the effect of basically everything in a virtual instrument these days. But to me, it sounds like somebody putting their full body into it, like muting after. Yeah,
like choking it, you mean?
Yeah, like holding against their chest.
Yeah. It's so it's really powerful, and the strings are in this high register, so it's like very piercing as well. And the first time we hear the theme, it's just the strings, and again, like half of the strings seem to be sustaining this F sharp in octaves, mind you. So like, and then, so we have this underlying like F sharp that's just sustained, like a drone, and then whatever it is. And then the choir comes in for the second instance of it, but there's still this F sharp being held, so it's like dee, 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 dee. Okay, here's where I do another thing that this reminds me of. Tell me if you hear it. It reminds me of the fourth movement of Shostakovich String Quartet No. 8.
Wow. I know Shostakovich's symphonies very well, but not the string quartet. So you might.
Okay. So there's in the transition from the third to the fourth movement. There's like, actually, let me play a clip.
Mm-hmm.
Do you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so not only is there this, here's where I'm going to explain myself. There not only is there that 3 stabs at a time, always, there is really, it's pianissimo, but the first violin does sustain this. And, okay, the notes, if we normalized it to be like in the same key or whatnot, and if we changed it so that in the Shostakovich, instead of sustaining an A sharp, this violin is sustaining an F sharp,
mm-hmm.
then the unison part that comes in would go. And basically what I'm saying is the way that it resolves in this cue from solo, and the way that like the notes, the final 2 notes happen in the Shostakovich example, that's the same relationship. It's like in both cases, it's this major second going to a minor third. So that's what that part reminded me of.
Yeah. No, that I can totally see that actually. That makes a lot of sense. No, I'm sold. It's something very rewarding about uncovering or even if that's not intentional, some kind of. I mean, recently I was listening to the Red Shoes, the
Hmm.
soundtrack
I saw
from
you tweeting
19.
about that last night.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, there's like 3 seconds of Joel McNeely's Shadows of the Empire in there, and I was like, I feel like probably nobody else has noticed this before. It's just a very the Venn diagram of Red Shoes fans and Shadows of the Empire's fans is probably not huge.
Probably not, but
Mm.
maybe listeners of the show.
Yeah.
That's where you would find them,
Yeah.
or your show for that matter.
Yeah, probably.
Um, but I don't think, as it is with these influences, like I feel that John Powell is definitely very influenced by Shostakovich, as is John Williams, as are so many composers. And for Powell being a violinist, I mean, he probably would know the quartets, possibly.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason I know it. I'm like, I've played that. Wait, it sounds it just feels similar. And so then when I checked it and looked at, or swapped out the notes to make them match, I was like, wow, yeah. That's totally what I was hearing with that. For me, it's like the pedal, it's like the drone of like one sustained note that really does it with that harsh rhythm. And otherwise, it's a very satisfying, I guess, I don't know if I should say homage, or basically it's like in the way that John Williams takes so much influence and naturally incorporates it into his writing. Like this feels like a very natural, like Powell, thing for Powell to have incorporated into his score that doesn't exactly sound like something John Williams would do.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think, as well, like it's, the combination of drone, but also like, I don't know if, I'm not sure what mode that is, but it is a mode. Of course, all music is in a mode.
Yeah.
Probably something like that.
I mean, or it could be just a tetrachord.
It's very, like, yeah. But I think with the combination of the drone as it's used there, it's sort of like, I think it's kind of, it's taking influence from a different musical world. And you discussed it so well with Frank, the Bulgarian or not influences. But I think, people talk about the drone being absent from quote unquote Western music up until the Beatles for like 400 years or whatever it was. And like I feel like there's a perhaps generic sense of Easternness or musical otherness going on with the drone and that mode there as well, as there is with the Hungarian choir. So but it is quite different.
Yeah. And good percussion at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So right after that, that's where the track ends. If people are following along on the soundtrack, that's where, what is it called? L3 and the Millennium Falcon ends. And then we begin Family Stories 4M27. That's the cue number. And here is, let's go back to the minutes to hear how that happens. Okay, so that is going to be at 2:59.
They'll bring the prize to us.
Okay, listen for the Han Solo searching variant theme here.
This is a Corellian YT-1300.
Ah, you know your stuff.
I've been on one before. My dad worked the line at the CEC plant before he got laid off.
Now we have
built these.
Han's other theme, Hero
He
It.
wanted to be a pilot, but
You, close with your old man?
not really.
Yeah, me neither. My mom, on the other hand,
They're getting to know each
most
other,
amazing
kind
woman I've
of.
ever known.
And
Excuse
then
me. Get your presumptuous ass out of my
L3 themes here.
Yep.
Ugh. Ugh, my sacral occipital circuit is sticking. You're gonna have to do that thing again later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trumpet.
Yeah, this is, it's a really lovely cue. I think Powell's, that's what kind of makes some of the stuff that I was talking about before about, the Harry Potter bit kind of entertaining, because he, some of these other cues which are underscoring sort of dialogue or just kind of sitting lightly in there. They're just so beautifully done. Yeah, and I just, I think it would be nice to hear a little bit more of that in those other sections that we were describing before. But yeah, like just some lovely little use of melody leitmotif to underscore that whole conversation, which is, yeah, one of the better moments of character development, I think, in this film. This relationship, this set of relationships that's hinted at and not quite explored fully in that classic Star Wars way of dropping half a conversation about the Clone Wars or whatever and sparking 10 years of fan fiction. Like I don't know whether there's like a comic
Clone
book
Wars
or
are not fan fiction. I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm kidding.
It sparked, years of speculation between 1977 and 2002. That's a long time for people to imagine what that might have meant. Yeah, like similarly, I don't know whether there's like a canon comic book or novel or something that explores Han and Lando's relationships with their parents. But like,
with their parents. Yeah, good question.
I sort of don't care. I think it's more fun to imagine based on that conversation.
I'm not sure. I never know what I want. I don't know what I want as a Star Wars fan. I just have to see it, and it has to convince me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because sometimes I want something, and then I realize maybe I didn't want that. Or maybe I only wanted it, but but not like this. I just realized, like, I think yeah. I think, Star Wars fans don't listen to us. We will just complain and ask for things, and then you give them to us, and then we're like, we don't want that. Something about John Powell's score, I think, and it just occurred to me, and it's surprising because I usually feel the opposite at least with the shows. Like I feel the opposite with the Star Wars shows, but I feel like my favorite John Powell moments are in those nimble, like underscore moments, like in the way that he goes between things. Like when Frank and I were talking about the train heist scene where there's just like a lot happening, a lot of details, like just a lot happening. Whereas I think some composers, like namely the composers who have written for the shows, are maybe better at the theme moments where like they're better when they're not as good at the underscore. They're better when it's like time for the Mandalorian theme, like the time where you like get into the groove and like the really catchy like pop song part, or like the part where it's like it's just the theme. You don't have to worry about like being flexible or like scoring to the cue or scoring to frame or whatever it is that you say. And I feel like with Powell, he does, for me, this is the hard part is the underscore.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that is the hard part. I think it's so clear from the history of film music, like when the director says to the composer, all right, like knock yourself out, that's easy. That's fun. It's when the director says, okay, now we need something subtle that emotionally cues the audience what to think without getting in the way, without drawing their attention to it. That's the hard bit. That's the
Yeah.
really hard bit. Yeah.
And it's hard to do without just, I mean, there are a million ways to do it. Just listen to a lot of the Star Wars shows where the underscore kind of can become really stagnant, or just
Mm.
rely on I don't know, certain tropes. I mean, it's also kind of not fair because some of them are animated, so there's like, it's just a little bit different in animation. But it's hard to be like, so like, it's just hard to be this nimble, especially when you're writing a score that is recorded by live musicians. Like, it's written like this is written. It's written like this. So yeah, well done to John Powell.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it like that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that I've been dying to say for like the last few minutes of this 5 minutes is that, it's just also like Donald Glover's vocal performance is just so good. It's his own take on the character. It doesn't feel like he's doing an impression, but it's also, whenever I hear his voice, I'm like, man, that's also somehow, it's both Donald Glover and Billy D. Williams, like his voice. And I just, I think, it's one of the amazing strengths of this movie.
Do you think specifically his voice is what like really sells it for you? Because a lot of people think Donald Glover does an excellent job, but hearing it as his vocal performance, because now that you say it, I'm like, yeah, his vocal performance, even without seeing him, I think I would be sold.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It feels like, in the same way that like Ewan McGregor's vocal performance is probably the thing that really brings together his Obi-Wan in the prequels.
You
like
think?
Yeah, I think so. Like, yeah, I think Ewan's voice is a little bit higher than Alec Guinness's, quite a lot higher actually. But the performance anyway, and the accent, and Donald Glover has changed his accent slightly as well for this. Yeah, I think it's something to do with the vocal quality, that feels like, not a deep fake version of that character as a young person, but like a possible version of that character as a younger person, like a believable version, and that's sort of all that matters.
What do you think of Alden Ehrenreich?
I feel like it's so, I feel like he was unfairly criticized. I think the movie is better than people gave it credit for, and certainly its status as the box office bomb of the Star Wars universe is unwarranted. Well, I mean, despite the fact that that's the reality, and I feel like his presence in the movie, like probably his career took a bit of a hit actually. So I feel like that's unjust, because I feel like he, like Glover, gives a performance that is evocative of the character as a young man without being an impression. Because there are like, there's like that guy on YouTube who does a fantastic impression of Harrison Ford.
Oh,
Like, yeah, a lot of, there's like fan casting around it. I don't think he's like a professional actor in the same way, but like, it's uncanny. But it's sort of like, that's not, like, an impression is not enough to anchor a movie around.
totally.
And neither is a deepfake actually. I mean, I found, like, let's not get into it. I feel like we've been circling around this, but like, I found the deepfake Luke in both instances like really dramatically unconvincing. Like visually it looks like him, but like in terms of the drama, it feels like there is a mannequin on the set that is just distracting from absolutely everything, and pulls me out of the universe, and just acts as like an anchor that totally drags the narrative and drama down, and the kind of mood. And so I think what Olin Ehrenreich does is, yeah, like he serves the movie, and he serves it really well. I think, yeah, if there are issues with Solo, it's not him.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I also think he just had such an uphill. It was hard for him to come out of this winning, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions for you, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do just have a minute left. So let's just get into the end, and then a couple people have questions for this episode and for you that I will ask you. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right, course to Kessel is set. Plugging coordinates in now. Just keep your pinky on the yoke and try not to mess anything up.
Whatever you say, my lady. Just let me know when you're ready to jump.
Ready and...
Okay, Han Solo searching.
It's just a simple jump to hyperspace and we're there? What's so tricky about that?
Plenty. Can't plot a direct course to Kessel. You have to thread through the Psychotic cluster and then pass through the Maelstrom.
You done flirting? I'm still ready.
You might wanna buckle up, baby.
This little vamp heroic theme. Of course, that sound was pulling the lever, going to hyperspace. It's very reminiscent of the Corellia chase.
Think. You want to make that
And now
move.
we're in the final seconds
Make
where
that move.
Beckett and Chewie are
Move. Okay. I guess I'll have to
Playing
destroy
Jar.
that little guy.
with no music. So
Yeah, it's a really nice little hero moment for the
Yeah.
theme, as there are a few.
and
But yeah,
I do like Han's themes.
me too. Yeah, it's nice. It's there's a naive excitement to it, I think, which is great. That's exactly what that moment needs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so someone on Discord asked, does the Falcon deserve its own theme? And then how and when do composers decide a character should get their own themes? Would we like Star Wars music better if it were as explicit in its match of theme to character as Peter and the Wolf?
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
I don't think the Millennium Falcon needs its own theme. I don't think everything does need its own theme. I think that actually Star Wars generally draws the perfect line between characters needing themes and characters not needing themes. Han, Chewie, they don't have themes in the original film. The Falcon certainly doesn't. And like, never have I sat down to watch the original film and gone, you know what this movie needs is
Another
is a hard
theme.
chord. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like there's enough, right? And it sort of goes back to one of the eternal debates around the score for A New Hope, which is why on Earth did John Williams use Princess Leia's theme for the death of Ben. And it's like, well, because it's the most emotionally wrought, resonant melody in the movie, and it doesn't really matter whether it intellectually fits, because emotionally it sure does. And I think there has to be that balance, because otherwise you're not composing an emotional piece of work, you're kind of making a jigsaw puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there has to be some flexibility to do, and this is actually, I think that it's easier to talk about John Williams's genius with leitmotif, because it's easy to kind of like do a YouTube video or whatever, like breaking down the jigsaw pieces, right? But actually John Williams didn't pioneer that It's not really his invention. The melodies are great and the way he uses them are great. But to me, what makes John Williams a great film composer is his emotional sympathy with the audience. In that, to me, he is one of the best composers that has ever written for film, because he is able to put himself in the shoes of the audience and know emotionally what they need when they need it. And so who cares what melody's playing?
Damn. Yeah, that resonates. I see this come up, or John Williams, I think it's undeniable that his scores have influenced a lot of other composers that have come after him. And I see this, not debate, but sort of observation come up sometimes about sort of putting thematic, like leitmotif style writing on a pedestal. Like, what do you think in terms of non-Star Wars movies, just the trend of like stuffing movies with themes? Do you think it's good? Do you like the fact that things, I don't know, that themes are back in fashion now? Or at what point, like, how do you make sense of that? Do you think it is common, for one, or do you think it still is relatively uncommon to write leitmotifs, write themes for characters?
I definitely think if you were to somehow like do a big data chart of leitmotif across at least Hollywood film history, you know, and the sheer number of leitmotif written per year, like we're still way at the bottom end of that. We're higher than we were in 2008, but yeah, like compared to 1940 or 1955 or whatever, like, yeah, like still nowhere near. So I think it suits certain kinds of films. You know, like last time I was on, I discussed the music of Bernard Herrmann, who, you know,
Vertigo premiered on this day.
Yeah. Oh, really? There you go.
That's what my Alexa told me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I actually spent some time recently going back over details of Vertigo's score. It was such a great soundtrack, but like there's barely a leitmotif in that whole score, and like it's probably one of the greatest scores in film history. And you know, like I think, you know, there's like parallel schools of film music writing, and he's probably at one end and John Williams is probably at another, which is kind of funny because, yeah, as I said last time, Herrmann was a kind of mentor figure to Williams to some degree, but you know, and Hans Zimmer would be much more aligned with the Herrmann style, like musical landscape, rather than here's a theme for 15 characters type approach. And like, I don't know, there's a place for both. Like not every movie needs a lot of themes. In fact, some movies would suffer greatly if you wrote a leitmotif for every character. In fact, some would suffer greatly if you wrote 3 leitmotifs for the entire film.
Why would they suffer?
Well, because they're more about melody is the most logical and intellectual form of music, and not every movie has logic and intellect. Some movies need a kind of anti-logic. They need motion and mood, and to not give the listener something intellectual to hold on to deny them that possibility that, you know, if we're talking like a Hitchcock movie, they're almost certainly better served by a kind of landscape, as Herrmann used to put it, where, you know, there isn't that ability to grow. I mean, there's that line in Vertigo where Midge comes to help Scotty after he's suffered the great trauma midway through the film, and she tries to play him Mozart because she's heard that someone says Mozart helps with people after they've had a great shock. And she ends that scene with Scotty basically being traumatized and nonverbal. And she walks away and picks up the vinyl and says, no, I don't think Mozart's going to help at all. And like, you know, yeah, Like some movies don't need Mozart. Not, you know, I mean, I'm using Mozart as a kind of semi-serious stand-in for melody, but yeah, like some movies need landscape. So yeah, I think definitely leitmotif works with many films like Lord of the Rings, for example. I heard you mention that briefly in, I think it was the last released episode of this before now. And like that's another circumstance where leitmotif really works, because Tolkien, like Star Wars, is a world building exercise, and I always think of the armorers who made, I think it was like 48,000 pieces of armor for Lord of the Rings, and like some of them made chainmail by hand for 3 years on that movie, so much so that they rubbed the fingerprint off their thumb.
What?
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's a movie where detail and the kind of love of detail is the most important thing. So Howard Shore wrote like over 100 leitmotifs for Lord of the Rings, and that makes sense, because that's that approach to that whole movie. If we had a kind of musical sonic landscape with, like, you know, chords that just kind of sits there like this, you know, for like 3 hours or whatever, that just wouldn't work for Lord of the Rings. But there are other movies where, yeah, 100 leitmotif would just be absurd. Like, you know, I don't know, like a film like Joker with you know, the soundtrack by Hilda Gunnarstottir, like that needs, I think it does have a few leitmotif, but a few, you know, it's not detailed. It's much more about this kind of really oppressive musical you know, sounds kind of sitting there clawing away at your ears. Yeah, so I don't know, I think all of these approaches are totally valid. And I would really hesitate to hold one up as the way to do
So
things.
leitmotif doesn't have to be the only gold standard.
Yeah,
yeah. It's a good way to. I feel like nowadays, the director would probably know in advance if they want to do a leitmotif style thing or not. Yeah, the film would probably guide the composer wouldn't be making these decisions in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It would be more obvious when the film is in front of them or when they're spotting or whatever. I tweeted if anyone had like last minute comments or questions about this scene, and Connor Power said, like what Powell does with the theme, but feels emblematic of the Disney score's trend of scoring nostalgia rather than the actual moment itself, which
I mean, yeah. As we said earlier, I mean, like, I just like Star Wars is nostalgia. The first film is incredibly nostalgic for a bunch of things that aren't Star Wars, but it is incredibly nostalgic, and the music is scoring the nostalgia. I don't think it's a Disney trend at all. Like, yeah, maybe it's Disney has a particular approach to nostalgia, but
well, every iteration of in your book, like it really made me see the original film in a new light, I guess, because I of course didn't have I have never done as much research as you have into the influences and the way that the original film, just how nostalgic it, like I knew it was nostalgic, but in the way, like politically, even that it's political naivety, that was interesting to read about, especially when compared to the politics of the prequels and the sequels, which have all had a different kind of valence to them. I like the section where you talk about the sort of underrated political acuity of the prequels. And then also you talk about how the sequels kind of seek to brush under the rug the prequels.
Yeah, certainly The Force Awakens. Yeah,
that's true. Especially The Force Awakens, and then
its marketing campaign as well.
Right. Yeah, that is a big thing. Yeah, that is a big thing where you talk about the nostalgia of the sequel of the current era of Disney, trying to recall the originals, not the prequels. We're
Yep.
nostalgic for one
Yep.
set of them, but not for the other set.
Yeah. Which is increasingly becoming so complicated. I wrote a book chapter for an academic like anthology recently, and it's not published yet, but I went through and kind of tried to chart, like on a little table, like the connections between Disney era Star Wars content and other era Star Wars content, and like how you start with The Force Awakens and pretty much the only thing that it's linking you with is the original trilogy. But by the time you get to like, I don't know, like the Book of Boba Fett or like Mandalorian season 2, it's like, yeah, it's linking with the original trilogy through the character of Boba Fett and the kind of Mandalorians, but linking to the prequels through Django, linking to the Clone Wars through like a bunch of characters, linking to Rebels, even as well. And like, it's sort of like every generation of Star Wars fan has an in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I feel like that's kind of been the end goal for Disney.
Yeah, the passing of the torch, or the generational pass off, handoff. I think like one thing that I want to read from your book is you talk about sort of the way that media can cheat death in nostalgic ways, and how having our characters in films and it kind of memorializes them. And you're right, Han Solo will never be dead as long as he exists in Star Wars episodes 4 through 7 and beyond. And of course, the Solo film. And it kind of makes me think about all these stories, or especially this movie, in sort of a way of like, in sort of that memorializing way. Not that Harrison Ford is gone, but he always wanted to be gone from Star Wars. Yeah. So
yeah.
But we still have him because he's in our media. So
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that I still find really intriguing about the ongoing Star Wars project. Yeah. Like, and like a lot of that goes back to like early media theory of like, people kind of trying to unpick what photographs do, like photographs and even portraiture is kind of the ability to preserve someone's likeness for when they die or after they die. I talk in the book about this totally unreal non-used advertising campaign
from Kodak campaign,
which was called it's called the death campaign. And like it was these ads of like, a photo of like like a kid and a dog being like, Billy was so happy, like sort of suggesting that Billy might be dead, or, the dog might be dead, or something like that. Or, like, this was the last Christmas we were all together. This was like in the 1930s or 40s. And like, it's so antithetical to everything that Kodak in its advertising stood for that they never used it, but it's still in the archives, and this academic found it in the archives, which is,
I want to see it.
I want to see it too. The book that's in doesn't have any pictures of it, and I'm like, I really, really, really wish that I could see it, but I think I'd actually have to go to the archive itself.
Sounds like a good excuse for a trip.
Yeah. I also love that. I have such sympathy for well, not sympathy, jealousy for that experience, because there's nothing like being in an archive and going, oh my God, nobody's seen this before. I've just discovered this cool thing. But it's really, yeah. Anyway, there's clearly this kind of cultural association with media through media history, but particularly, once we reach the what Walter Benjamin would call the era where art can be reproducible, basically, rather than existing in a singular time and place, like an oil painting before the modern era only exists in one time and space. But now it exists in Google image searches and catalogs and whatever. So like, yeah, I think there's like this real theme of media that, yeah, like it can kind of preserve someone's life to some degree, or at least the appearance of life. And yeah, for sure, you know, Star Wars in this era with killing off characters, but also with actors dying as well, and this kind of, you know, ongoing experimenting with deepfake technology to kind of de-age characters, and we see Disney doing that so much with the MCU as well, but definitely we see that a little bit in Star Wars too. It's kind of, you know, yeah, Carrie Fisher used to joke that every time she looked in the mirror, she had to pay George Lucas $1. That was a joke that frequent. But like, it's a whole nother deal now, right? Like these characters exist in a world where even if Disney didn't want to do that, or Lucasfilm didn't want to do that, they are a part of collective cultural memory, which is also, you know, that reminds me of a phrase that John Williams used while describing his music for the first Star Wars film, that rather than write like self-consciously science fiction music that evoked future worlds of tomorrow, he wanted to lean into the myth of the film, the long time ago part, rather than the galaxy far, far away part, and write music that, he said, like the Force theme with the French horn, he said something about it sits in the cultural salts of our minds, is what he said. And like, I just think that's such a great phrase, and it just it feels like deep time.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're right. By looking to the power of the past, nostalgia allows us to downplay mortality and give authority to what has already been lost, expired, or ended. We might even think of nostalgia as the poetics of evading death's grasp. Nostalgia allows us to revisit the past and imbue it with meaning, often in direct relation to the present. Anyway, everyone, get this book. Star Wars After Lucas. Before we end, I want to just run down what themes were in this set of minutes. And so we have the Star Wars main theme, A section. We have the gang, Enfys Nest, Young Han Solo, the searching variant, Young Han Solo heroic, L3 theme, and Young Han Solo searching. So all of the Han Solo themes in the soundtrack were on L3 and Millennium Falcon, and then Family Stories for M27. You've already answered the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to revise any answers, or not revise, but like you can add to your answers if you feel inclined to. So I'll remind you of what you said, or I'll ask you the questions again, and you can tell me if you want to hear your old answer. So in 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Gosh, I can't quite remember my answer from last time, but I still think it's like orchestral, like nimble orchestral nostalgia, something like that, I reckon.
Okay, well, you can give a new answer. So nimble orchestral nostalgia.
Yeah.
What is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you're curious about?
Well, you know, I think right now I'm so curious to hear what Natalie Holt's Obi-Wan Kenobi soundtrack sounds like. That's very exciting news. I really, really like her music for Loki. I will be curious to hear what Williams's main theme sounds like, but I'm almost more curious to hear what Natalie Holt's score is like.
Yeah. And finally, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars? Do you want to add anything to Vertigo, which you said last time?
Yeah, it was Vertigo last time. No. I'll give another answer because I was listening to it just yesterday. This is a really unusual one. Angela Morley, who I think you and Frank Lehman were talking about.
Orchestrator.
Orchestrator for A New Hope. I was listening to her Watership Down soundtrack, which came out the year after Star Wars, 1978. And it's great. It's really good. It's probably one of the deep cuts of the film music world, but Like, I don't think it's even on Spotify. But it's on YouTube, I think. And like, there's a couple of moments where I was like, oh, that's very close to like the Imperial motif, like, or like the Stormtrooper, like the dun 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 from sort of, you know, like Stravinsky Holst rhythmic strings sort of thing. And I was like, like, because it's noticeably like very similar. And I was like, is that her saying, hey, that was me?
That's so
Or-
funny.
Or is she just going, this is a cool soundtrack that I kind of worked on and I like this bit. I'll
Kind of
write
worked
that.
on it.
I'm super, super interested. But yeah, that's another thing I was going to say. And I'll say this while on air. I reckon it should be a thing. The long-term goal is next time I'm on, we should have Frank on, like as in Frank.
Like a three-way?
Yeah, because despite the fact that I've like corresponded with Frank over Twitter like a lot, I've never actually spoken with him in real time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and like, you know,
That's
our work is so I was like, what better opportunity? So I'm laying down the gauntlet. I reckon next time.
Next season is Empire Strikes Back. So
well, that would be perfect.
it's on. We'll do it. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Where can people follow you online?
Yeah, just on Twitter is my main place. I'm just Dan Golding, at Dan Golding on Twitter. I also have a website, which is dangolding.com, but probably just Twitter is fine. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listeners, we'll be back next week. Thank you so much for getting halfway through this film now. Next week, we'll be getting into minutes 66 through 70. And may the force be with you. Thanks for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.